Okay, we are going to now move on to the next story. I think we've spent enough time on Mr. Foster and his family. We are going to move on to this. Equality's watchdog publishes appalling guidance on excluding trans people from single-sex spaces. Boop, 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 boop. I haven't read this yet. I don't know what any of this is about. Clara, can you fill me in? Do you know what this is about? Are we in for a bad time here? Is this about to be a bad time? This is unfortunate. It's bad? Okay. All right, well. Okay. Britain's so-called equalities watchdog has published guidance on single-sex spaces that essentially includes a how-to guide on excluding trans people. Yeah, Turf Island. Yep. On Monday morning, 4 April, because we're British and we say it that way, the Equality and Human Rights Commission published its long-promised guidance for separate and single-sex service providers, offering its interpretation of the Equality Act with regards to trans inclusion. The EHRC called on services to prioritize users' dignity and respect when deciding who can and cannot use their services, and states that providers should balance the, quote, rights and needs of trans people, end quote, with the different interests and needs of users. The guidance goes on to offer ways in which trans people can be included and excluded lawfully. One example illustrates how a business might ban trans people from the appropriate toilet for their gender, instead banishing them to a separate gender-neutral facility or instructing them to use the toilet for their biological sex. I corrected the little typo up there. That's instructing. That's what it's meant to be. Good morning, Mercadian Merchant. Hello, it's nice to see you again. The situation in the UK is going to be even worse for trans NB people. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. The hard part about all this is that NB people kind of get lost in all this. Is that, like, all the attention is pretty much on trans women. And it's negative attention, sure. But that means that no attention, positive or negative, is being paid to NB people, or to a lesser extent, I think, trans men. I think people pay a little bit more attention to trans men than they do NB people on average. But yeah, I think both categories of people need a lot more support from the trans community in general. And I think we all need to just come together and be a little bit more united on that front. Another example suggests a scenario of trans women being excluded from women-only fitness classes because of the degree of physical contact involved in such classes. Now that's a little weird. The degree of physical contact involved in such classes? What do you mean physical contact? Are you talking about, like, contact with your body and some object? Or are you talking about, like, two bodies contacting each other? What are you afraid of here? What is the problem? What's the big issue? I don't understand. The Trans Legal Project slammed the guidance as appalling and harmful. It encourages bigotry and discrimination, the project, a legal research group, told Pink News. Its examples include invitations to organizations to blanket ban trans women from exercise classes and women's toilets on a biological basis. Trans women are perverted, terrifying creatures, while female-assigned NB or trans men are just thought of as silly girls going through a phase. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When trans women are thought of as monsters and demons sometimes. and AFAB people who are trans men or NB themselves, yeah, they just don't get anything. You don't get shit. People laugh at you. People don't take you seriously. There are quite a few AFAB friends of mine that identify as non-binary, and they talk to me all the time about struggles like this. They tell me all the time about how hard it is to get even other trans people to take their identification as non-binary seriously. It's hard to get even other trans people to use they, them pronouns. My partner's AFAB and non-binary? Yeah. I totally feel you right there. My partner's AFAB, and she's had thoughts about her identity. We're, talking about that stuff, working it out and everything. But yeah, it absolutely is a struggle to get people to use they, them pronouns, especially if you're non-binary AFAB. That's true. Under the Equality Act, trans people can be excluded from single-sex spaces to achieve a legitimate aim. But bigotry is not a legitimate aim, the Trans Legal Project argued, nor is trying to drive trans people completely out of society because of ungrounded and confected fears. Confected, that's interesting. That's an interesting word to use. Seen way too much NB-phobia from binary trans people? Yeah, I know! It's incredible, isn't it? As if this is not your struggle too, right? As if we are not all going through the same struggle. It's disgusting. The Good Law Project told Pink News that the guidance is the latest in a string of examples from the EHRC throwing trans people under a bus. True. What do the EHRC guidelines say? The guidance makes multiple references to biological sex because this is how legal sex is defined under the Equality Act for people who do not have a gender recognition certificate. The phrase biological sex does not appear anywhere in the Equality Act. In parts, when discussing trans inclusion, it refers to people of the opposite biological sex. When it comes to drafting access policies, the EHRC says that providers can exclude, modify, or limit trans people's access where a service provider has limited resources and physical space to alter the way the service is provided, or if they are dealing with groups with particular needs. Stating that banning trans folk can only be done if there is good reason based on evidence to do so, the EHRC lists examples of providers having or do not have lists examples of providers that have or do not have a legitimate claim to ban trans users. I'm having to edit this as we read, but I'm used to it, so it's okay. If I'm forced into a different bathroom, it better be luxurious. Yeah. It better be fucking luxurious. It better be fucking gold fucking floors and heated seats, and there better be somebody there to wipe my fucking ass when I'm done taking a shit. Clara Divine, thanks for the sub. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Let me just do this real quick, actually. I'm just... Inject some happy. Yes, inject some happy. Thank you, thank you. There better be a TV in every stall. I want the bathroom Homer gets when he gets a promotion. That was a good episode. I like that one. All right, one reads, example, a community center has separate male and female toilets. It conducts a survey in which some service users say they would not use the center if the toilets were open to the members of the opposite biological sex, for reasons of privacy and dignity, or because of their religious belief. Religious belief is just a fucking... Ooh, we never should have had that fucking... We should have worded that a lot better. Bigotry is not a good reason turned into, if bigots object to trans people in the toilets, then it's okay to ban trans people to appease their bigotry. Real quick with their example. Yep, that's true. That's true. It decides to introduce an additional gender-neutral toilet and puts up signs telling all users that they may use either the toilet for the biological sex or the gender-neutral toilet if they feel more comfortable doing so. The trans-led charity Gendered Intelligence called this both distressing and contradictory. For years, we have pressed for clarity on the application of single-sex exemptions in the Equality Act. Rather than providing this clarity, the EHRC guidance only serves to widen the exemptions and expand the exclusion of trans people. The example of the community center extends proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim to exclusion of trans people from bathroom facilities based on public opinion, seemingly suggesting that the existence of trans people is an affront to public dignity. Yeah. This is, it's very often that we hear the phrase tyranny of the majority. Have you ever heard that? Or tyranny of the minority? Either of those? In this case, that's what we have, is tyranny of the majority. Is that they've, if given the opportunity, people would vote absolutely to get rid of all trans people. I have no doubt in my mind. If it were not for, the protections that we see currently, things would be a lot worse. This is not law, it's just guidance, and we all need to know that the United Turf Kingdom's media companies will use it to push it as if it is law. Yeah, that's true. Where is the care for the dignity and well-being of trans and non-binary people? Or, for that matter, the gender non-conforming cis women who will undoubtedly be targeted in the wake of this guidance? What were we just talking about? The toilet example suggests that a service could effectively institute a blanket ban on trans people. The EHRC's own codes of practice on the Equality Act say that such policies should be applied on a case-by-case basis. Case-by-case basis. Well, that's a little absurd, don't you think? Joe Maugham, barrister and director of the Good Law Project, said the guidelines could have been much, much worse. If you think this version is bad, you should read previous iterations, he told Pink News. Good morning. Good morning, it's nice to see you, my friend. Indeed, a draft version of the guidance was leaked to Vice World News in February, and it appeared to show that the EHRC was going to advise prisons, gyms, and other businesses to ban trans people from their services unless they have a GRC, Gender Recognition Certificate. It's the legal something or other in the UK or something, I guess. Since the Gender Recognition Act came into force in 2014, fewer than 5,000 people have successfully gained a GRC. Around 200,000 to 500,000 trans people are estimated to be living in Britain. Wow! That's 1%! That's fewer than 1% in some cases. That's absurdly low. I wouldn't call that program successful. Not in the slightest. It's a pathetic and cowardly way, because if it were a law, a judge or a petition could strike it down, but since in this it's guidance, it will just exist in this Schrodinger point where it will just hurt us. Yeah. It's because it's a panel of cis people who will push back for any reason. Yeah, yeah. I feel you. Former staffers told Vice that they had talked EHRC chair Kishore Faulkner down from adopting a totally gender-critical position. Maugham added, it is extraordinary that a body statutorily charged with protecting the dignity and rights of trans people is having to be restrained by civil servants from throwing them further under a bus. Gendered Intelligence said the EHRC has failed in its duty to independently advocate for equality and human rights. It added that the guidance is also a sign of how far the EHRC has slipped from the public pulse. The vast majority of businesses, organizations, and establishments have no interest in excluding trans people, and we must not let our public lives be impacted by the actions of a few powerful individuals, the spokesperson added. EHRC guidance, which applies to England, Scotland, and Wales, is not the law. It is an interpretation of current legislation. Organizations are in no way required to follow it. I want to point something out to you. Really quick. Something that I've noticed and you've probably picked up on already, if you've been reading the article along with me. You've noticed by now, I'm sure, that the editing on this article is subpar. That the quality assurance was not run properly, and that this kind of slipped through with a few mistakes. Would you agree? Would you agree to that assessment? That there may be a few mistakes here with this article? Wait, so they can discriminate against someone who's legally their gender? Yep. So one of the mistakes that I want to point out real quick is this little sentence right here. Do you see anything about this sentence that looks maybe a little bit different from the other ones? This one right here. This one. It's a bigger font, isn't it? That's like a 1 or 2 point bigger font. Hi, Biso. Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well. Do you know why? Do you know why it's a bigger font? I can tell you right away. It's a copy-paste. You're right. Dahlia, you're right. It's a copy-paste. I wouldn't say the whole article is copy-paste. I would say this bit was pasted from somewhere else, because they got checked on it and wanted to correct it last minute and didn't bother correcting the font and everything as well. Dahlia, you've got your wrinkle braid on today. They probably made this in 40 minutes. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Trans people are protected under Equality Act by the gender reassignment protected characteristic, which is defined as someone who is changing their physiological or other attributes of sex, regardless of whether they have a gender recognition certificate or not. You're gonna think good all day? Hell yeah. Got your good thinking brain. A ton of these articles are pumped out in very little time. Yes, that's true. Yes, we saw that actually yesterday. Demon Mama was doing a stream about the Will Smith Chris Rock thing, and there was a bit where Jada Pinkett Smith had posted something on Instagram. It just seemed pretty innocent or whatever, but Demon Mama went on Google and found all these. There were like 70 websites that wrote fucking articles about the post that went up on Jada Pinkett Smith Instagram. Who cares? Who cares about this shit? Who cares about what Jada Pinkett Smith is posting on Instagram? As long as she's not hurting anyone, who fucking cares? Okay? Whatever. But yes, you're right. A lot of these articles are pumped out really quickly. Because that's the nature of the news cycle anymore. That's the nature of the news. If you don't get it, you're too late. Sad. In its guidance, the EHRC makes clear that when deciding whether trans people can access services, providers shouldn't demand to see a person's GRC as it would breach their privacy. You should also not make assumptions about whether or not a person is trans based on gender stereotypes, such as those based on appearance or clothing, the guidelines continue. The EHRC also recommends that if trans folk are barred from a service, the provider should signpost trans-friendly resources. Far from clarifying how the single-sex exemptions in the Equality Act should be used, the EHRC's latest non-statutory guidance is likely to create more confusion, a Stonewall spokesperson told Pink News. It appears to go against the core presumption of the Act, which is that inclusion should be the starting point, and shifts the focus towards reasons trans people, and specifically trans women, can be excluded. And that's the article. That's it. Now, we can pop over real quick and take a look at... we can take a look at that other draft. They linked another draft here. A draft version of the guidance, which was a little bit stricter. New guidance recommends assigning clothing gender roles to quantify how trans or NB you are. Yeah, right? So this is the leak. Equality's watchdog wants to exclude most trans people from single-sex spaces. Leak suggests. The Equality and Human Rights Commission has been accused of planning to exclude trans people from single-sex spaces without a gender recognition certificate in leaked guidance. I love how their only actual tangible complaint is just, well, I demand dignity away from the transes. Yeah. Yeah. Seriously. An unpublished guidance pack dated from the end of 2021. Oh, hi there. 5Bug Live. Thanks for the follow. An unpublished guidance pack dated from the end of 2021 was leaked to Vice World News, the latest in a string of revelations relating to anti-trans sentiment within the EHRC, the UK's equalities watchdog. Do they expect us to never have to use the bathroom? You know, when I go out, do you know what I do? When I have to use the bathroom? When I go out in public? I don't go. Or I find a Starbucks. Because I find that Starbucks is like the one place that I can consistently go because they have gender-neutral individual bathrooms. There's one unit in the bathroom. Well, maybe two if you count. Sometimes they'll have a urinal, I guess, and a toilet. But most of the time they just have the toilet, right? And it's just the toilet and a sink, and that's all you get. And they've usually got two, and they're both gender neutral, which makes sense to me. Make all bathrooms gender neutral. Then you have twice as many bathrooms. It's amazing. Also, people at Starbucks tend to be friendly. Yes, that's right. Because regardless of what the company says or does about their trans or gay employees, it is true that there are a bunch of queer people that typically work at Starbucks. More often than not, you can walk into a Starbucks and there will be at least one queer person that works there. They might not be there that day, but there's usually at least one queer person that works at a Starbucks, okay? So, I don't give a fuck. I've yet to face any discrimination, but cannot wait to school a transphobe who may try. Good luck to you. I do not like confrontation, so I avoid it like the plague. I work at Starbucks and so many of my coworkers are queer, including me. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I love Starbucks. But yeah, it's a comfortable place for a lot of people. People can just go there and know that they're going to be accepted, you know? And so that's really cool. I like that. Same thing with esthetician offices. There's always one cool queer person. I did not know that. I don't think I've ever been to an esthetician, but I will keep that in mind. Thank you. I know that because of this guidance bullshit, the UK's Safe to Be Me Council thing is basically falling apart with no funding or people because all the LGBT orgs pulled out. Yes, that's what we're talking about next. I love you very much, Clara. Thank you. Really depends on where you live, though, to be honest. Here in Montreal, I know a transphobe harassing a trans person in a bathroom is much more likely to get scolded by the common folk than other places. Yes, that's true. Come with you next time you get cryo done? Okay. No, you're fine. You're fine, Clara. You're fine. Yeah, I don't know what cryo is, but sure, I'd be happy to accompany you. Okay. We're getting distracted a little bit. Let's just see if we can find some of this. No, I guess not. I guess we'll have to read the article. Okay. Well, couldn't find any quotes or anything. The documents appear to show that the EHRC, which says it works to promote and uphold equality and human rights ideals and laws across England, Scotland, and Wales, has been working on proposed guidance advising organizations like prisons and gyms, as well as businesses, to bar trans people from single-sex spaces unless they hold a GRC. Obtaining a GRC is intrusive and difficult. Less than 1% of trans people in the UK have one, and the system does not recognize non-binary people, meaning that the vast majority of trans and non-binary people would be impacted. The commissioners of the EHRC are appointed by Minister for Women and Equalities, Liz Truss. In 2020, she named Baroness Kishwer Faulkner as chair. Kishwer. Autistic privilege is not recognizing when somebody is giving me a weird look. Ah, yeah, I get that. I get that. All right. Former EHRC staff members told Vice World News that Faulkner had said excluding trans people from single-sex spaces would protect women's rights. Faulkner was also reported to have been incensed when John Lewis introduced gender-neutral changing rooms last year, with one former employee saying Faulkner was furious about John Lewis letting down women. Another added, she was being transphobic. The team just wants to exclude trans people more. One source currently working at the EHRC said that it didn't matter if the guidance was actually enforceable, adding, the leadership team aren't worried about that, they just want organizations to know that they won't be sued for being transphobic. The idea that someone could be excluded from services without one is fiction, it added on Twitter. Okay. I don't see any quotes from this thing, so I guess it's not here. What was the name of that? I have to pull up the article, hang on. There it is. Okay. I do not really want to read another Pink News article, so we're gonna read a different article. Okay. So yeah, I can't find any quotes from the draft or whatever, so I'm going to assume that we don't have any. So that's this story. Ugh, God. It really is just like impossible anymore, isn't it? We're just facing so much adversity from so many different fronts. Like, it's hard. It's an uphill battle. We need every ounce of support we can get.